Okay, I'm going to go ahead and get started this morning by just officially welcoming everyone. Sawadee Kap, welcome. Welcome to everyone here at the temple, and welcome to everyone who's joining us online. This is the very beginning of our group learning program, which is a 7-month program where I'm going to be gradually walking students through understanding the foundational teachings of the Buddha that it takes to move the mind to this enlightened mental state where the mind can be peaceful, calm, serene, and content with joy, no longer experiencing any feelings such as anger, sadness, frustration, irritation, annoyance, guilt, shame, fear, stress, anxiety, the loneliness, boredom, the resentment, jealousy, shyness, even the slightest displeasure is eliminated from the enlightened mind. You're never even in a bad mood anymore by the time you train your mind to get to this enlightened mental state. As part of that training is meditation, and then there's other training as well. So what I'm going to do is start us off with meditation to be able to help you guys understand a bit about meditation and just experiencing it. And then afterwards, I have some things to share with you guys related to an introduction to the teachings of the Buddha and really getting you started to just understand what the teachings of the Buddha are. And then I'm going to go through some details about the program itself to help you guys understand how to make the most benefit out of this program. And if you are attending here at the temple, you can attend, but you can also attend online too. We have many people joining us today through Facebook, YouTube, and Zoom. And this is even recorded, so it's on our YouTube channel and Facebook and on our podcast. So as you miss classes here and there, you're always welcome to kind of learn at your own pace. And all the resources are available for you at no cost, whether it's the classes, whether it's the books and audiobooks, personal guidance, and all the various things that you're going to need to be able to learn and develop your practice in moving the mind to this enlightened mental state. So I'm going to invite you guys to join us for meditation. The way that I start with meditation is I start with a chant. I'm going to be chanting. This is a Buddhist chant, and you guys are welcome to chant along. As part of this group learning program, there does become a time where I teach students how to do the chanting. Right now, some of you guys have maybe learned that if you've been studying with me before. Maybe for others of you guys, this might be the very first time that you've been exposed to any kind of chanting. I'd like to let you know that during the lifetime of the Buddha, they did chanting as a way to commit the teachings to memory. That there are no rites, rituals, ceremonies, or worship, or prayer, or anything like this that are part of the teachings of the Buddha. You might see people doing these things, associating them with the Buddha, but the Buddha never actually taught any rites, rituals, ceremonies, or worship. He never taught prayer or anything like that. So these chants during the lifetime of the Buddha, they were used in order to commit the teachings to memory, because everything that he taught was oral. He just spoke. And as he spoke, they didn't write things down because the technology to write things down existed in China, but it hadn't yet made its way to that region of the world. The Buddha was born in modern day Nepal, and then he taught in northeast India. So the technology to write things down didn't exist, and the language that he spoke in didn't even have a script itself to be written down. So they didn't write things down until after he died. So they used chanting as a way to commit the teachings to memory. There's nothing mystical or magical about chanting. It's not trying to invoke any special powers and try to get somebody to do something for you. Everything in the teachings of the Buddha is to train your mind and cultivate the mind. So during his lifetime, when they were learning his teachings and trying to develop their intellectual understanding of what it takes to move to this enlightened mental state, they needed to commit the teachings to memory in order to then practice them. So they would chant as a way to commit the teachings to memory. These chants that I'm sharing with you, and for those of you guys online, you can get these from our website. If you go to buddhadailywisdom.com and you click on free books, you'll see the daily chants there that all the students here at the temple, they have a one-page chanting sheet. These chants that I use, they are most likely not even created by the Buddha himself. They were probably created by his students, because we're going to be chanting in the Pali language, which is the original source language of the teachings of the Buddha, but you can see the English translations that I have there. The English translations, you can see there's a lot of respect and gratitude and admiration for the Buddha. And a Buddha doesn't walk around teaching his students to chant things to him out of admiration and out of respect for him. He would have eliminated his ego, his arrogance, his boastfulness, his pride. He would have already eliminated all that. So he wasn't going around teaching people to chant these things to him. But if you learn from a teacher who helped you move from this anger, sadness, frustration, and all these other discontent feelings to the peace and the joyful mental state that is a permanent mental state, and he didn't want anything from his students, he didn't expect anything from his students, he just shared the teachings out of loving kindness and compassion. If you learned from a teacher in that way that didn't want anything from you or didn't expect anything from you, but helped you get to this enlightened mental state, you'd probably have a lot of respect and gratitude for that person too. So I suspect his students actually created these during his life or after his death as a way to honor and respect him for his dedication to sharing the teachings that it took in order to get to enlightenment. So after we do the chanting, there's going to be a period of time where I'm providing a bit of guidance to be able to help you understand how to meditate while we're actually meditating. And then there'll be a period of time where it'll just be quiet. We'll just be meditating. I'm sure you'll hear an occasional sound either here at the temple or wherever you are online. You might hear occasional sounds, but I'm going to teach you in meditation what to do when those things come up. But there'll be this period of time where it'll just be us meditating together, everyone here and everyone joining online. Then after we do the meditation, I'm going to come out of that meditation with some chanting. So there will be coming out of that meditation with chanting. And like I mentioned, you're welcome to join along in the chants. And as part of this program, I'll be teaching students how to chant in the future. And then in terms of your body position, there's 4 positions that the Buddha taught in order to meditate in. There's seated, lying, standing, and walking positions. Typically, people are learning in the seated position. This is pretty common, either sitting on the floor or sitting in a chair. And there's these other positions that are needed at different times, which I'll teach you at different times. But since most people are learning in the seated position, I'll give you guys a little bit of guidance on the seated position, is that if you're on the floor, you might decide to put some cushions under your rear. This helps to lessen the angle at the hips, the knees, and the ankles. Sometimes people like to put their legs off the mat. This, again, helps to elevate the hips and lessens the angle at the hips, the knees, and the ankles. Usually you're crossing your legs and you like to have them just lightly crossed. Whereas if you have them real tight, it'll impede the circulation. So you'd like to just have your legs lightly crossed. And then your hands and your arms, the Buddha put his right hand over his left with his thumbs together, and he put this into his lap. So if this is comfortable for you, you could use it. But this practice isn't about everybody doing it exactly the same way, because it's not actually possible. So the body position that you take should be comfortable, not painful, but not luxurious. So if this right hand over left works well for you, you could use it, but there's other options as well. Some people like to put their palms on their thighs or on their knees. Some people put their palms up. Some people rest their hands comfortably in their lap. And then if you're in a chair, some people like to put their feet flat on the floor or cross at the ankles. And then, of course, with your hands and arms nice and comfortable. The upper body should be erect. This keeps the mind attentive and alert during the meditation, whereas if you were slouched, the mind would have a tendency to be dull or lethargic. But if you were real rigid, and the mind could be overactive or uptight. So you'd like the upper body to be in the middle, where it's erect. This keeps the mind attentive and alert during the meditation. And it also helps you to breathe, because with your sternum up and your shoulders back, it will allow you to breathe in naturally through the nose, in and out of the nose. So again, I'm going to ease us into meditation with some chanting. You're welcome to join, and then I'll come back in with guidance. Arahang Samma Sambuddho Mahakeva Bhutang Mahakevanang Apivateyami Savakato Mahakevata Dhammo Dhammang Namasami Supatipano Mahakevato Savaka Sangho Sanghang Namami Namo Rasa Bhagavato สัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะอิติปิโสมหะคะวะอะระหังสัมมาสัมพุทโธวิชาจารณังสัมมุโนสัคขะโตโรกาวิโตอนุเตโรปุริสาดามาสติสัตตาตาวามานุสนังพุทโธภะคะวะติ Okay, with the lower body and hands and arms comfortable, and the upper body erect, just close the eyes and start breathing in through the nose and out through the nose. Here you're just looking to establish the breath. A nice, natural, steady, consistent breath. Not forced or controlled. Just a gradual inhale through the nose, experiencing the full breath. And then, whenever you're ready, exhale out through the nose. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. Your breath may not match up with the guidance that I'm providing, and that's okay. This is your practice. I'm just here for guidance. You can use this voice as a reminder that whenever you get to the next inhale, breathing gradually through the nose, developing a nice, natural, steady, consistent breath. And then, whenever you're ready, exhale out through the nose, experiencing the full breath. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. With the breath well established, start fixating the mind on the breath, either the sound of the breath coming into the nose or the sensation of air moving over the skin into the nose. The breath is the present moment. Fixate the mind on the breath, the present moment. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. With the mind fixated on the breath, whenever you notice that it moves off the breath, cut that off, let it go, and come back to the breath, the present moment. No need to observe the thought, label it, judge it, analyze it, or even try to figure out where it's coming from. Whenever you notice that the mind is moved off the breath, cut that off, let it go, and come back to the breath, the present moment. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. I'm going to be quiet now and let you do this work of focusing on the breath, cutting off and letting go anytime the mind moves off the breath. You have nowhere to go. There's nothing to do. No one needs you right now. This is your time to focus on the breath. Breathing in and out. ระหังสัมมาสัมพุทโธมหาเกวาโพตังมหาเกวันทังอภิวาเทมิสวากขาโตมหาเกวตาธัมโมธัมมังนามัสสามิสุปฏิปันโนมหาเกวโตสาวกสังโฆสังฆังนามามินับโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนับโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนับโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะอิติปิโสมหะเกวาอะระหังสัมมาสัมพุทโธวิชาจารณังสัมปุโนสัคคาโตโรกาวิตุอนุเตโรปุริสาธัมมาสติสัตตาตาวามานุสนังพุทโธภะคะวะติ Okay, if you guys would like to slowly ease your way out of meditation. Once again, I'd like to just welcome all of you guys, those of you guys here at the temple, those of you guys joining us online. Welcome to all of you guys that joined us since we started meditating. As I mentioned, this is the very beginning of our group learning program, the very first day where I'm helping you guys to get an introduction to the teachings of the Buddha and then helping you to understand what the group learning program is all about. For those of you guys that are here at the temple, if this is your first time here, I'd just like to let you know that there's bathroom in the back of the room, the very last door on the right. You're welcome to get up and use the restroom at any point. There's even restrooms outside the classroom. If you go outside the classroom and follow the signs around to the main bathrooms, you'll see that there's larger bathrooms over there because this one bathroom may actually be occupied at different times. Then we have water over here as well that is provided by our students that you're always welcome to help yourself and enjoy the water, make yourself comfortable, make yourself at home. So whenever students first start learning with me, I usually like to share with them a little bit of understanding to kind of help them approach the teachings of the Buddha in a way that's going to be most beneficial for you. One of the things that I share with students when they first get started with me is that the teachings of the Buddha, they're not based on belief. There's no belief in the teachings of the Buddha whatsoever. You're not believing a bunch of things and then hoping that something good happens when you die. It's not believe, and then hope something good happens when you die. Instead, you're learning teachings now in this life. You're investigating them. You're examining them. And then you're reflecting on those teachings to independently verify whether they're true or they're false. And then you're practicing teachings in order to train the mind and uproot certain pollutions that the Buddha discovered about the mind. And as you're doing this, this is where you'll see the peace and the joy start coming into the mind. You'll see your personal, professional relationships really blossom. You'll notice that you have more focus, concentration, clarity, deep memory, because you've been eliminating the pollutions out of the mind. You'll notice you'll get to a point where your mind isn't even experiencing a bad mood anymore. You're just always in a good mood because you've uprooted the causes and conditions that are producing that bad mood. But you can't get to that through belief. You need to acquire wisdom. So you shouldn't believe anything that I ever say. You shouldn't believe anything that's in any books that I write. You shouldn't believe anything that I teach you in these courses, in these programs, and in these retreats. Instead, you learn what I share with you, intellectually understanding it. And where you're having challenges, you ask questions for clarifications. Maybe something I'm sharing with you conflicts with what you currently know, what you currently understand. And that's a really good thing. If you're in a classroom with a teacher where they're sharing something with you and everything they share you already understand, you already know, you're not in a place where you're learning, you're growing, you're not evolving. So if you're hearing things from me that conflict with something that you currently understand or you're currently thinking, that's a good opportunity to ask questions and seek clarification so you can get more insight. So that's the learning part where you're investigating, you're rolling up the sleeves, you're soaking your teeth in and really working to understand the teachings of the Buddha. But then you start reflecting on these teachings. You start independently verifying it, start comparing it and contrasting it to your experiences in life, because you've lived a certain period of time at this point, and you can contrast what it is that I'm sharing with you to then be able to reflect on your own direct experiences and determine whether or not that's representing what you're experiencing in your day-to-day life. Then you start practicing the teachings of the Buddha. You start integrating them into your life. Meditation is one of those practices, but you're going to learn a whole host of practices, certain tools and techniques that the Buddha taught in order to train the mind. And in this way, you'll acquire wisdom. What you're acquiring wisdom of is what's called the natural laws of existence. The Buddha taught these natural laws. The teachings that he taught 2,500 years ago, they're just as applicable now in the present moment as they were 2,500 years ago, because he's describing these natural laws, and these natural laws haven't changed from the lifetime that he lived until now. It's the same exact natural laws. And one of the reasons why the mind is struggling and having difficulties in the unenlightened state is that it lacks wisdom of these natural laws. It just doesn't understand what it doesn't understand. So with the lack of wisdom, the mind's going to naturally make unwise decisions that then produce unwholesome results in your life. One of those unwholesome results is the anger, the sadness, the frustration, irritation, annoyance, guilt, shame, fear, stress, anxiety, boredom, loneliness, shyness, resentment, jealousy, all of the displeasure and the grief and the misery that is experienced in the unenlightened state. This is the results of the mind struggling and having difficulties because it's not yet awake to the wisdom of the natural laws. Because when you don't understand what you don't understand, you'll struggle, you'll have difficulties, you're going to make unwise decisions. Not because you're a bad person, not because you've done anything wrong necessarily, it's just that the mind lacks certain wisdom. But slowly but surely, you gain wisdom of these natural laws. And as you do, you'll start making wiser and wiser decisions that produce wholesome results. And one of those wholesome results is the mind's becoming more peaceful, more calm, more serene, more content, more joyful, because you understand the world around you. The Buddha didn't teach the way the world should be. And if everybody follows these rules and commandments, and the world's going to become a more peaceful place. Instead of teaching the way the world should be, he taught the way the world is. And by understanding the way the world is, you're awakening to these natural laws of existence. And now you'll navigate the world more readily with this wisdom. And now you'll make wiser and wiser decisions that produces wholesome results. Because these natural laws of existence affect you, whether you're aware of them or not. You've done this same exact process with another natural law that you may not be aware of. As you were growing up, as all of us were growing up, we didn't understand the natural law of gravity. And because we lacked wisdom of this natural law, we struggled, we had difficulties. This natural law was affecting us, whether we were aware of it or not. When we were 1 year old, 2 years old, 3 years old, we didn't understand this natural law of gravity. But we fell down, we hit our head, we bumped our elbows, we broke open our knees, or, we broke our toys. We had all kinds of difficulties difficulties with this natural law of gravity because we were unawake. We lacked wisdom of this natural law. And because of that, we naturally made unwise decisions that led to unwholesome results. Again, not because we're a bad person or we did anything wrong, just because we lacked wisdom and we didn't understand what we didn't understand. But slowly but surely, we started gaining wisdom of this natural law. And by the time we were 10 or 12 or 14, we were fully awake to this natural law. We had fully cultivated wisdom about the natural law of gravity. And then we started making wise decisions that produced wholesome results. We started tying our shoes a bit tighter. We started looking at the surface of the sidewalk as we were walking. We stopped being so giddy and bouncing around all the time as children. And we got to the point where we are now able to ride a bicycle. We can climb ladders. We can maybe ride motorbikes. We can get on airplanes and travel all over the world because we understand this natural law of gravity. We naturally make wiser decisions that lead to more wholesome results. Like this glass of water behind me here. Right? Nobody ever told me to put it behind me, but you're going to naturally make wiser decisions because I know that if I put this glass of water in front of me here, I'm going to have a tendency to knock it over. This would be unwise for me to do that. So because of the wisdom of the natural law of gravity, I naturally know to put this glass of water behind me, and there it won't get spilled. So you're going to naturally make wiser decisions when you're awake to the natural laws of existence. So this is what the mind needs to do as it moves closer and closer to enlightenment, is it needs to awaken to the natural laws of existence. And you can't do that through belief, because with belief, you don't know what's true or false. You're just believing it. Maybe because somebody convinced you to believe it, or maybe you convinced yourself to believe it, but you don't really know what's true or false. So it's really easy for your mind to get shaken up or become unsteady or unstable. But what you're looking to do is get to the point where you know the truth and you've acquired wisdom of these natural laws. So as I share teachings with you, it's important that you don't just sit back and believe what it is that I'm sharing. As you learn in the books that I write, it's important that you don't just believe what you're hearing and what you're seeing in the books, but instead you get involved with the content, that you learn it intellectually, you investigate it and examine it. And where you need help, ask questions. I will help you see how to independently verify anything that I'm sharing with you. Then you start reflecting on it and actively looking at your own direct experiences to see if what I'm sharing with you is matching with your direct experiences in life. Because ultimately what you're going to be learning is about how your mind functions and how the world around you functions. And then you start practicing. Essentially what the Buddha did is he helped to explain the human consciousness, the human mind. He took psychology of the human mind and he brought it down into a common language that you can understand your mind and what's causing the difficulties in your mind. And then you can uproot those causes and conditions and get to the point where the mind's completely peaceful and joyful for the rest of your life. And we refer to this as enlightenment. And as we go in this program, I'm going to be teaching you different times what enlightenment is and going through all the details. I'm going to be sharing with you the core central teachings of the Buddha and helping you to understand all the various things as a foundation to be able to help you build a life practice to the point where you can gradually integrate these teachings into your life and be practicing them on a daily basis. And you'll see the results for yourself, that your relationships become more and more improved. They become at ease. Your mind becomes more and more peaceful and more joyful. But it's up to you to decide to do that work. This is an independent practice. It's an independent journey. Each individual student is working to cultivate wisdom. A teacher isn't here to convince you of anything. I'm not here to force you to do anything. I'm not here to have any expectations of you. I love you as you are. I'm here to help you and support you and guide you on the path, but each individual student is doing the actual work. So as you being an independent practitioner, you're not a follower, you're not a devotee or anything like that. You're an independent practitioner, someone who's looking to get to the truth. And I'm kind of like a tour guide, pointing out to you all the various things that you'll need to learn along your journey. But it's up to you to decide to ask questions, to read the book, to come to class, and to get involved with the content so that you can then understand these natural laws and awaken to this wisdom. To get you started, I'm going to share an introduction to the teachings of the Buddha to be able to help you to just understand a bit about the teachings of the Buddha from afar. We're not going to go into the actual teachings itself very much today, but instead we're going to go into that starting next Sunday. Here, I'm just going to kind of give you this bit of an introduction to these teachings to help you understand them from a little bit of a higher level. First, let's just talk about what a fully, perfectly enlightened one is. What is a Buddha? A Buddha meets 3 primary criteria. A Buddha gets to enlightenment by themselves. The journey in order to get to this peaceful, calm, serene, and content mind with joy. An individual who's a Buddha, they've done this by themselves without the help of any teachers or any guides. This is the first criteria of what makes a Buddha a Buddha. The second criteria is that once they awaken to enlightenment, they will dedicate the rest of their life to sharing their independently discovered teachings with countless people during their lifetime. And countless people get to enlightenment during that person's lifetime. That's the second criteria. And people know that they've gotten to enlightenment because their mind's peaceful, calm, serene, and content with joy. They don't experience any anger or sadness or frustration any longer. And then the third criteria is that a Buddha is going to preserve their teachings in such a way that countless more people are going to get to enlightenment after their death. So these are the 3 main criteria, is they get to enlightenment by themselves without the help of any teachers or any guides. They then dedicate the rest of their life to sharing their independently discovered teachings with countless people, and countless people get to enlightenment. Then they preserve their teachings after their death in such a way that countless more people can get to enlightenment. So by the time you get to enlightenment, you can be an enlightened being, or what we refer to as an arahant, but you wouldn't be a Buddha. A Buddha meets these 3 unique criteria. And one of the reasons why a Buddha is able to get to enlightenment by themselves without the help of any teachers or any guides is this 4th criteria. A Buddha has a profound memory. They have a deep, clear memory. Even in the unenlightened state, their mind is functioning with a deep memory. But once they awaken to enlightenment, their mind is very, very crisp, very clear. They're able to remember countless details about their current life and their past lives too. And this is what helps them to actually get to enlightenment as a Buddha in their last life, is that they've accumulated wisdom over multiple lifetimes, and all that wisdom has come together to the point in their last life where they're able to get to enlightenment without the help of any teachers or any guides, because they've accumulated this wisdom over a significant period of time. So your mind has certain memory, and you have a certain capacity in your mind. You could think about it like a hard drive. You have maybe 500 gigabytes or 1 terabyte hard drive in your mind. And as you have different experiences in your life, because you have this limited capacity, you're going to need to delete old files in order to store new files. And this is why in the last 5 or 10 years or so, you pretty much remember most of the things that you experienced. But in terms of your childhood, you have spotty memories, just kind of like spotty things that you remember here or there. You don't have direct recall of what's happened in your childhood. But in the last 5 years or so, you have pretty good recall of what's been transpiring in your life. And that's because you have a limited capacity. You've had to delete your old files from your childhood in order to store these new files in the last 5 years or so. A person who's going to become a Buddha, they actually don't have that limited capacity. They have an unlimited capacity. They can store all kinds of memories from their previous lives in this life too. Even individuals who are not a Buddha, they can have memories of their past lives, but a Buddha is going to have direct recall of countless details from their past lives and their current life too. And this is what helps them bring forth all the wisdom to be able to get to enlightenment in their last life as an individual Buddha without having any teachers or any guides. Then this other criteria is that a Buddha can quickly determine the condition of a person's mind just by spending a bit of time with them. And they only do this in order to help them. If this person is a student of theirs, they're able to then help them with teachings to be able to help them along their journey to enlightenment. So because a Buddha has done this work to eradicate the pollutions of their own mind on their own, they have deep, profound wisdom of what the symptoms of these pollutions of mind produce in terms of interacting with somebody. And now, as they interact with an individual, and that person is saying certain things or doing certain things, an individual who's going to be a Buddha and ultimately is a Buddha, they can now quickly determine the condition of the mind of their students, for example, and then be able to help them with teachings as that person might need teachings to be able to help them overcome various challenges and struggles in their life. And then this last thing here in terms of a Buddha Buddha is a living, breathing, walking example of their teachings. They teach one thing and they're doing that particular thing. They don't teach one thing and do something different, because a Buddha understands that they teach just as much through their spoken words as they do through their actions as well. So not only are they speaking and they're sharing teachings about what it takes to get to enlightenment, but they're also functioning as an enlightened being, and their students are learning through their actions. So a Buddha is going to be a living, breathing, walking example of his teachings, so that their students can actually learn from the way that they interact in the world, whether it's learning how to speak and interact, or certain actions, their love, their kindness, their compassion. You'll be able to see all of those things. Their generosity, you'll be able to see that in the way that they interact in the world. And that's one of the ways that a student is going to be able to learn directly with the Buddha, not only through their spoken words, but through their actions as well. So this is a bit about what a perfectly enlightened Buddha is, or a perfectly enlightened one. We refer to them as a perfectly enlightened because they don't have any teachers. They don't have any guides. Their mind is fully purified. Where someone who learns from a teacher, sometimes if a teacher is sharing something that is maybe a little bit off, that isn't exactly the path to enlightenment, a student might hold on to some of those things, and they maybe have like 10%, 20%, 30% of what they've learned isn't actually the true path to enlightenment. Maybe they actually do get to enlightenment, but only 70, 80, 90% of what they've learned is actually what led to their enlightenment. There might be still a little bit of extra baggage kind of around. But by the time somebody gets to enlightenment as a Buddha, they're fully, perfectly enlightened. They're not holding on to anything and anything that wouldn't lead to enlightenment. Because what a Buddha is going to do is that as they're training their mind, if something leads to an improved condition of their mind, they know that that is the path to enlightenment. But if they try something like a particular meditation, or they're trying to do something in order to train their mind and it doesn't work, they'll discard it. They're not going to just hold on to it because they don't have any teachers or any guides. They're not just holding on to it out of respect for their teacher. They completely discard it. So this is why we refer to them as a fully, perfectly enlightened Buddha. Let's talk about what the teachings of the Buddha are, so that you'll understand what they are. This is the path to attaining enlightenment in this life through purification of the mind. The teachings of the Buddha are helping you to understand those pollutions so that you can then purify the mind and eradicate the things that are keeping the mind in this unenlightened state, where it's experiencing sadness, anger, frustration, and other discontent feelings over and over and over again. This enlightened mental state is a mental state that is attainable during this life, and then from that point forward, you'll always be experiencing the peace and joy of the enlightened mental state. You can also attain enlightenment at death too. That would be the next best option. But of course, it'd be much better to attain enlightenment during your life, and then for the rest of your life, you'll experience the peace, calm, serenity, and contentedness with joy, and all the other benefits of attaining enlightenment. But if you attain enlightenment at death, that's the next best thing, because at least then you're not being reborn back into the world. Even this cycle of rebirth is actually independently verifiable. So you're going to hear me mention it here and there, but eventually we'll be talking about this in more detail throughout this program. By the time somebody gets to enlightenment, they're no longer experiencing any of these discontent feelings. You'll hear me say this in this program multiple times, that the sadness, anger, frustration, irritation, annoyance, guilt, shame, fear, stress, anxiety, boredom, loneliness, shyness, resentment, jealousy, even the slightest displeasure is eliminated from the mind. The teachings of the Buddha are to teach you how to eradicate the causes and conditions that are producing those feelings. So by the time you purify the mind, those feelings are no longer going to be experienced because you've eliminated the causes and conditions that are producing them. Oftentimes people think that it's somebody else or something external that's causing your mind to experience these feelings. But what you're going to learn next week on Sunday is what's causing these feelings. I'm going to explain to you what's causing these discontent feelings so that then you can learn how to eradicate them from the mind. As you're purifying the mind, you'll experience this high degree of focus, concentration, clarity, and this deep memory because you're eradicating the pollutions that are causing them. By the time someone gets to enlightenment, they'll have deep wisdom with politeness, kindness, friendliness, and respect for all beings. Right now, you might find that pretty challenging. There might be certain people that you interact with that you are maybe impolite, unkind, unfriendly, and disrespectful to. But this is just because the mind has certain pollutions. As you eradicate those, you'll get to a point where you have this deep wisdom about the path to enlightenment. You will have fully transformed your mind, and you'll be able to be polite, kind, friendly, and respectful to all beings around you and anybody that you interact with. But you're not able to do that easily when the mind has these pollutions there. You'll notice that you're not causing any harm in the world. And therefore, because you're not causing harm to others, harm isn't coming back to you. In the unenlightened state, there's a certain amount of lack of wisdom that the mind has of these natural laws. And you can think that you're doing all the best things in the world. You can think you have all the best intentions. And then when something happens, you're like, why did this person do that? I don't understand what happened here. And you're thinking you have all the best intentions in the world, but this thing might have blown up on you for one reason or another. And that's just because the mind has this lack of wisdom. There's still certain harms that you're causing in the world that you don't necessarily realize. But you can get to the point where you fully awake to the wisdom of this natural law, and now you can get to the point where you're not causing harm to others, so therefore harm isn't coming back to you. So by the time you purify the mind, you're no longer causing harm in the world to other beings. You'll notice that as you purify the mind, that your personal and professional relationships are conducted with ease, that they're completely peaceful, that you don't have any hostility or bitterness or resentment in your relationships. That might not be the case right now. You might notice that in certain relationships, you do have some bitterness, you do have some hostility. And that's normal when you're coming to the path to enlightenment. But by the time your mind fully gets to enlightenment, you will have cleared all that out within your own mind, that you would have purified your mind. So now in your relationships, when you're functioning through this purified mind, that you'll notice that you don't have the resentment, the bitterness, and the hostility in your relationships any longer. You'll notice that what you're going to be focused on once we get into chapter 8 of this program is developing the mind to eradicate craving, anger, and ignorance. These are what's referred to as the 3 poisons, or the 3 unwholesome roots, or the 3 fires. These are the 3 high-level descriptions of what's plaguing the unenlightened mind. When we talk next week, I'm going to be giving you kind of a little window into the unenlightened mind through the 4 Noble Truths, and we're going to get into the heart of what's really causing the mind to experience these discontent feelings. But then by the time we get to chapter 8 in this program, we're going to be going deeper into what's called the 3 poisons, or the 3 unwholesome roots, or the 3 fires. This is called craving, anger, and ignorance, because whenever you're making decisions through these 3 unwholesome roots, it's going to produce unwholesome results for you. Now, this translation of ignorance, this is what people are translating what the Buddha talked about. But an enlightened being and a Buddha, they don't talk in a derogatory or negative or degrading or demeaning way to people. And nowadays, this word ignorance is kind of like a derogatory, degrading word. Like, I wouldn't refer to anybody as ignorant. So even though this is the word that you'll see a lot of people translating the words of the Buddha to, I prefer to use the phrase, the unknowing of true reality. Some people use confusion or delusion or misunderstanding or misperception. That's what's describing this 3rd poison, or this 3rd unwholesome root, that the mind lacks wisdom. It has this unknowing of true reality. And because of that, the craving and anger continues to exist in the mind, and the mind's kind of stuck in this continuous cycle of experiencing anger and sadness and frustration and all those discontent feelings over and over and over and over and over again. So when you understand what craving, anger, and ignorance is, which I'll go into in chapter 8, and then you understand the solutions of how to eradicate them and uproot them out of the mind experiences the peace and the joy. This is how you get to enlightenment, by purifying the mind of craving, anger, and ignorance. Some more things about what the teachings of the Buddha are, is there are these natural laws of existence. Like I was mentioning earlier, you're awakening to these natural laws. The main natural law that you're awakening to, even though there's others, is what's called the natural law of Gama. There's a word that most people are more familiar with, which is karma. This is the Sanskrit version of this word. The original teachings of the Buddha are in what's called the Pali language. And in that language, we refer to this natural law as Gama. So you'll hear me use that word because most people that are studying the Pali Canon or understanding the Pali Canon will tend to use that particular word. If this word translated to just one English word, I would just use that English word because it'd be much easier for everybody to understand. But there's still 2 Pali words that I need to use that don't translate to just one English word. And this is one of them. Every single other word that I use is all going to be English, but this word and one other word, I still need to use the Pali language. So the word Gama, what it means is cause and effect, or action and results. It's the results of your decisions. The natural law of Gama, it isn't punishments and rewards. It's not mystical, magical. It's not a black cloud following you around. It's not something to believe in. It's not a concept. It's an actual teaching. It's a natural law that's functioning at all times. It's like a sequence of events, that there's a certain cause, and then there's going to be an effect, or there's a certain action, and there's going to be a result. Or another way to think about this is there's a certain decision that you make, and then based on your decisions, you're going to experience a result, either wholesome or unwholesome. And if you make a wise decision, you're going to experience wholesome results. If you make an unwise decision, you're going to experience unwholesome results. So as you awaken more and more to this natural law, you're going to naturally make wiser decisions that produce wholesome results for yourself. And that's what you're mainly awakening to on the path to enlightenment, is this natural law of Gama. This is what the mind in the unenlightened state is unfamiliar with. What we tend to do in the unenlightened state is whenever we're experiencing anything unwholesome in our life, we will typically blame it on somebody else. We will look around the world and see who we can blame this particular thing on. But what you're going to be learning with the natural law of Gama is that everything that you experience in life is a result of your decisions. And there's real power in this. It really empowers you, because if you continue to believe that what you experienced was good luck or bad luck or destiny or fate, or what you experience as a result of what other people are doing, then that means you have no control, no ability to improve your life. But if you can get to the point where you understand that what you're experiencing is the results of your decisions, and I'll help you to be able to see that more and more closely, then by understanding that what you're experiencing is a result of your decisions, that means if there's anything in your life that you don't particularly care for, you just need to cultivate wisdom, make different decisions, and you'll experience different results. Whereas if what you're experiencing is good luck and bad luck, or destiny or fate, or if it's other people that are causing difficulties in your life, you're locked in. You can't change anything. But if you can embrace the natural law of Gama and see the truth for yourself, that what you're experiencing in life is based on your choices and your decisions, now if there's anything that you don't particularly care for in your life, you cultivate wisdom, you make different decisions, and you will experience different results. So I'm going to help you guys to understand this natural law, because everything that the Buddha taught in one way or another is coming back to this natural law. So you're going to gradually be learning this over the entire program and gradually awakening to this natural law. And by the time we get to chapter 9, I'm going to be going into this natural law in detail. But everything that I teach, even starting today, tomorrow, or Sunday, and all the other days that I'm going to be teaching you, you're going to be learning about the natural law of Gama, but I'm not going to necessarily be calling it out and saying, hey, this is the natural law of Gama. But each thing that the Buddha is teaching you is to help you awaken to the wisdom of this natural law of Gama. So this is why you're learning, reflecting, and practicing to acquire wisdom. You're never believing in these natural laws of existence. This is how you actually get to wisdom of these natural laws, is by not believing them. Because with belief, you don't know what's true or false. But when you learn intellectually, you reflect on that to independently verify it. And then you practice making wiser and wiser decisions, and you see that the condition of your mind and the relationships that you have in your life are improving. You'll know that this natural law is true 100%. So the Buddha didn't explain how the world should be, and that if everybody practices certain rules or commandments, that the world's going to become peaceful. He's explaining the way the world is. And this natural law of Gama is the way the world is. But you just can't see that in the unenlightened state. You don't necessarily see the cause and effect or the action and result. So that's what a Buddha has done, is they've awoken to these natural laws, and now they're going to explain them to you. An individual is going to teach you what these natural laws are, but then you learn, reflect, and practice to be able to see the truth for yourself. And as you learn the way the world is, you'll navigate the world more readily and more peacefully. So training the mind to experience complete peace and joy through acquiring wisdom of these natural laws of existence is what's going to eradicate the pollutions of the mind and help you awaken to this wisdom. Slowly but surely, you're going to learn not only the natural law of Gama and these other natural laws, but you'll learn certain tools and techniques to eradicate these pollutions from the mind and experience more and more peace and more joy in your life. What the teachings of the Buddha are is that he spoke very clear, very concise, and very precise. His teachings are timeless, that what he taught 2,500 years ago is directly applicable today because it's the same exact natural laws that existed 2,500 years ago as that exist today. These natural laws don't actually change. So that's why when you see his teachings using his own words, which I'm going to be sharing with you starting next Sunday, I'm going to show you his actual words as I'm teaching you in all these various classes. You'll see that he spoke very clear, very concise, and very precise. You don't have to interpret his words. When I'm teaching you, I'm not interpreting his words. I'm just helping you to understand. And you could read his teachings and understand them, but it's helpful for a teacher that has some experience to be able to point out to you and guide you along this path. But you'll be able to see when you see his words, they're very clear. They're very concise, very precise. They're very straightforward. They don't need to be interpreted in order to be understood. And he's explaining this timeless natural laws. You're going to see at different times that the Buddha does teach about the cycle of rebirth. He teaches the 5 realms of existence, the hell realm, the animal realm, the afflicted spirit realm, the human realm, and the heavenly realm. And he taught these things for a reason, because this is the way that the world is. And you can independently verify these teachings on the cycle of rebirth and these 5 realms of existence. You may not have the wisdom of how to do that right now, but as somebody journeys on the path to enlightenment, they come to a time where they might be interested in independently verifying this. And there's teachings to be able to help you independently verify the cycle of rebirth and these 5 realms of existence. When someone's first starting out on their journey to enlightenment, I suggest that they set the cycle of rebirth to the side, because it's not something you need to approach at the very beginning of your journey to enlightenment. Because what's happened in the past, it's in the past. It doesn't matter at this point. And what may or may not happen in the future, it's in the future. It doesn't matter right now. What matters is right now you're in the human state. Your mind's discontent, you're experiencing sadness, anger, frustration, disappointment, annoyment, and all these other discontent feelings. If you focus on the core central teachings, which we're going to start with next week, that's what's going to lead to the improvement to the condition of your mind. But there is this cycle of rebirth that students will eventually start to learn, maybe 1.5 years, 2 years into their development. As they're learning and practicing, they start to learn about the cycle of rebirth. In this program, we get into the cycle of rebirth towards the end of the program. It's around chapter 22 is where I start to help students, I think it is, or maybe chapter 20, somewhere around there, as I start helping students to understand a little bit about the cycle of rebirth, showing you how your mind has evolved from animal existences into this human life. Now, the Buddha taught the cycle of rebirth in these 5 realms of existence for a reason, because as you're learning and developing your mind with the core central teachings and you're eradicating more and more pollution out of your mind, you can easily have memories of past lives. You might have already had that and might not have even realized that you're having some residual memories from past lives. And if he didn't teach you the way the world is and that you've had past lives, as you start having these vivid memories of your past lives, it could really shake you up. Let's just say you started having memories of being murdered or maybe being raped or something like this, and your mind was having these vivid memories and you weren't quite sure what was going on. This could really shake you up if you didn't understand that this was from a past life. Another thing that can happen as you're eliminating some of this pollution out of your mind is you might notice that you start having communication with beings from these realms. You can start experiencing voices or hearing these beings talking, or they could be interacting with you, either from the hell realm, the animal realm. Of course, you interact with plenty of beings from the animal realm, from the afflicted spirit realm, which is like ghosts. Of course, the human realm, you interact with human beings all the time. And then there's this heavenly realm, beings that can interact with you and communicate with you there. And just like you can be sitting at a restaurant and you can be ignoring the conversation that's happening 2 tables over, you can do the same thing with these communication from beings from the hell realm, the afflicted spirit realm, or the heavenly realm. But as your mind's becoming less and less polluted, you might start noticing communication from beings from these other realms. And then a third thing that can occur is as you're eliminating more and more pollution from the mind, you might actually see some of these beings. You can see hell beings potentially, or afflicted spirits, or even heavenly beings. These are formless beings. They don't have physical form, but some people, even in the unenlightened state, can actually see these beings. So if the Buddha didn't teach you the cycle of rebirth, and he didn't teach you the 5 realms of existence, and you started having these experiences from learning and practicing his core teachings, where the pollution is being uprooted from the mind, you could be really shaken up by those experiences. But by learning the way the world is, then you'll understand that these things are completely normal. That when you start experiencing memories of past lives potentially, or you start experiencing communication with beings from other realms, or you start seeing beings from these other realms, you'll know that it's completely normal. You're always welcome to reach out to me and I'll help you to understand, but it's completely normal. It's not uncommon for people to experience these things. The Buddha did teach about God. Some people don't realize this. Even within Buddhist communities, people will say that the Buddha rejected God or he denied the existence of God. This actually isn't really true. If you read the original teachings of the Buddha, you will see that the Buddha did teach about God, but he didn't put God as a central role in his teachings because God's not the one who determines whether you get to enlightenment or not. Instead, he put you as the central role in his teachings. It's you that's learning, that's growing, that's developing. It's not God that the one is who determines whether you get to enlightenment or not. It's your decisions that determine that. So you will see various teachings in the original words of the Buddha where he's mentioning God or he's talking about God, but he's never teaching about worshiping God. He's never talking about punishments and rewards. He's not talking about bowing down to God or fearing God. He's not talking about being jealous of God or God is jealous of you or anything like that. He's just talking about this being that exists, and his main focus is helping you to learn and practice and get to enlightenment. So when we get to chapter 18 of this program, I will be teaching you, if you would like to have a relationship with God and continue to get to enlightenment, I will teach you how to do that, because there's certain things that you might have learned where you might be fearful of God, or you might think God punishes you or rewards you or controls you or something like that. But then also for some people who aren't interested in a relationship with God, I'm going to teach you how to do that too. For me, it's up to you. If you'd like to have a relation with God, fine. I'll teach you how to do that and still get to enlightenment. If you're not interested in having a relationship with God, fine. I will teach you how to do that as well without having any kind of anger or bitterness or hostility toward this being or any fear either, because sometimes people can have that related to this particular being. So you can get to enlightenment either with or without a relationship with God. So I'll teach you how to do that when we get to chapter 18. And then some other things about what the teachings of the Buddha are is that the largest, most complete collection of the teachings of the Buddha are in what's called the Pali Canon. This is 45 large volumes of books that are about maybe 10 centimeters thick, or maybe that's 4 or 5 inches thick. These are 45 volumes of books. This is the largest, most complete collection we have of the teachings of the Buddha. And what I'm teaching you is based on this original source teachings. I have this book series of 13 books that has consolidated his teachings down into these 13 books, so that these 45 volumes of books, you don't need to necessarily go out and read them. You don't need to learn the Pali language, but instead there's really accurate and reliable translations that are being provided for you at no cost, that you can download these books for free. You can take them and go print them. You can get printed versions here at the temple, or you can order them on Amazon. So this is the largest, most complete collection of the teachings of the Buddha that makes up his original path to enlightenment. And his teachings were documented after his death by his students. During his lifetime, there were countless people who got to enlightenment. And once you get to enlightenment, you won't forget the teachings that it took you to get to enlightenment. The wisdom that you cultivate on this path, you'll never forget that. So by the time there was these countless people that had gotten to enlightenment by the death of the Buddha, there were about 500 of them that got together and they documented the teachings of the Buddha in what we now refer to as the Pali Canon, these 45 volumes of books. And I've consolidated this into this book series called The Words of the Buddha, The Path to Enlightenment, Revealing the Hidden. And then lastly, in terms of what the teachings of the Buddha are, The way that I think about them is it's to heal from what hurt you so that you never need to hurt ever again. There's certain things that are in your mind that you're experiencing certain painful feelings, and you might have been experiencing various hurt or various pain throughout your life, certain misery, certain discomfort, certain grief or sadness or sorrow. But by the time you're training your mind, you'll heal from what hurt you. But you're healing from what truly hurt you. Because oftentimes what we think in the unenlightened state is what's hurting you is something external. You might think it's your parents or your brothers or your sisters or your boss or your coworkers or your neighbors or the weather or some other thing. Maybe your government. You think they're the ones who are hurting you. But in reality, you can get to a point where you get liberated from all of these discontent feelings to heal from what hurt you. So with the Buddhist teachings, he's going to explain to you what's truly hurting you, what's truly causing these painful feelings, so that once you understand what those are and you eradicate them from the mind, you can heal from what hurt you so that you never ever need to hurt ever again. So let me pause here and see what questions you guys have. I'll do this throughout the various talks that I do, is I'll kind of pause and see what questions students have. If you're here at the temple, we have microphones in this white bowl. If you guys could use a microphone, that way the people online will be able to hear you. If you get a microphone, you can keep it with you. You just press the gray button on front. The lights come on. You just wait a couple of seconds, and then you hold it up to your chin, and we'll be able to hear you here at the temple, and they'll be able to hear you online. For those of you guys tuning in online, you can put your questions into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom in the comment section. I'll be able to see that, and I'll be able to answer your question. And for those of you guys in Zoom, you can electronically raise your hand, and I'll be able to see that, and you can open up your microphone, and we'll be able to hear you here at the temple, and they'll also be able to hear you online through our live stream as well. So is there anybody that has any questions on anything I've been sharing so far?
David, I'm just curious. It mentions the largest, most complete collection, and it mentions 45 volumes. Is that complete? Do we know if there's maybe 50 volumes or 52 or missing volumes?
It's the largest, most complete collection we have of his teachings, but we know that the Pali Canon doesn't have everything that he ever taught. So, for example, in the Pali Canon, we can see that he taught loving-kindness meditation, and he talks about how it eradicates anger, hatred, ill will, and all those other versions as well. So we know that he taught loving-kindness meditation, but what he actually taught and how he taught it, we don't have that in the Pali Canon. So when I say it's the largest, most complete collection, it's the largest, most complete collection that we have. But in terms of everything that he actually taught during his life, because of 2,500 years of history and impermanence, there are certain things that we don't have in the Pali Canon. And this is one of the reasons why you need a teacher, you need a guide, because you need somebody who's done the actual work. Because something like loving kindness meditation, because it's not documented in the Pali Canon, all we have in the Pali Canon is that loving kindness meditation is used to eliminate anger, hatred, and ill will, and these kinds of things. You don't necessarily know what is the loving kindness that the Buddha taught. So what you do is you study with a teacher who's eliminated anger and sadness and frustration and all these other discontent feelings, and whatever they're doing, then you know that if it worked for them, then it'll work for you. But that at least just gives you confidence that it will work. But then when you learn it and you practice it and you develop your mind, then you'll see that it's actually working. So there's some things like that that the Buddha taught that aren't in the Pali Canon, but then there's a teacher that's there to help you and guide you and help you to be able to see what the true teachings are. But then you don't believe that. You learn it, you reflect on it, and you practice it. And then as you're getting more and more wisdom, you'll be able to see the truth for yourself. But this is the largest, most complete collection that we have of his teachings. Yes, sir. Yeah, you just press the button and then just wait a second. There you go.
I'm there, yeah. I have a question about getting enlightened. Yesterday I was watching a documentary, and there was an investigator, a scientist, who said like 30,000 years ago the humanity was in a much higher frequency. There were not many weapons there, villages were not surrounded by walls, and I was thinking later on, like, maybe there's also some sort of spiritual climate, and nowadays we have a lot of war, we have a lot of negative things going on the world. Is it? Can you say something about maybe like a spiritual climate to get enlightened? Is it going up and down, or is it like always a little bit similar?
So when a Buddha arises in the world, this is the very best time to get to enlightenment, because a Buddha is going to have deep, profound wisdom of what it takes to get to enlightenment, and whatever they taught, that's what's going to help an individual get to enlightenment. But since the Buddha awoke over 2,500 years ago and he's died, his teachings have been in a state of decline since then. And he talked about this during his lifetime, that this was going to occur. That during his lifetime, of course, the teachings were shining in the world, but because of language and human development, it was only that region of the world that could understand his teachings because they were in that localized language. And then for 500 years after his death, his teachings were very strong and very vibrant in that region of the world. And they started to spread. But then the teachings slowly have been declining for 2,500 years. And now I would say that we're at a low point in society. And one of the reasons why people probably didn't fight maybe as much 30,000 years ago is because there weren't as many possessions back then. Nowadays, there's so many possessions, so many material things that people are holding on to. The mind's clinging. My car, my phone, my computer, my house, my clothes, my jewelry, my food, mine. And this is where the craving really sets in. This is where the anger arises. So now we're at a point where humanity can now learn and practice the teachings, and we can restore these teachings back into the world to the point where all of humanity can understand them. Because during the lifetime of the Buddha, because he spoke in a regionalized language, there was only certain people that could understand the teachings. But nowadays, humanity has evolved to a point where we speak an international language of English. Like if I took a survey here in this room or online, we have people from all over the world that are being able to understand me, which wasn't actually possible 50 years ago or 100 years ago. I mean, now using modern technology, I can be sharing teachings all over the world through the internet, which the Buddha wasn't able to do. He knew his teachings would reach the entire world, but it wasn't going to be during his lifetime. So sure, there's different times of history where it's the teachings are more readily available for beings to get to enlightenment. And I would say now is one of those time frames where the teachings are coming into the world in a very strong and vibrant way that they can really shine in the world. And that also happened during the lifetime of Gotama Buddha as well.
So one of the things I learned was that, and you talk about a Buddha. Mm-hmm. Does that mean there were previous Buddhas as well, 30,000 years ago? Or ones that will come in the future that follow the same path?
So this is the only conflict that I've seen in the Pali Canon, that everything that I've studied in the Pali Canon, there's no conflict, there's no contradiction at all. Because when a Buddha teaches, there is no contradiction in their teachings. But the people having written them down and passed them down for 2,500 years, it would make sense that there's a contradiction that slips in. But I've only found one in the entire Pali Canon, right? And this is the one conflict, that there's times where the Buddha is documented as having talked about previous Buddhas before him. But then there's also documentation where he says, I am the discoverer, the declarer, the originator of the path to enlightenment, undeclared before me. Meaning that there is no Buddha before him, that he was the first Buddha. And I tend to think that that's actually the case, because if you understand the path to enlightenment and what it takes to get to enlightenment, there's a deep intellectual understanding that needs to occur, but then ultimately there's a practice that you need to develop. And prior to 2,500 years ago, humanity hadn't evolved in terms of our language to be able to communicate the depth and level that you would need in order to get to enlightenment. So I tend to think that Gotama Buddha was the first Buddha, and that there weren't Buddhas before him, but there could have been. We just don't know. And even though it's really interesting to think about, it doesn't really matter at this point, because your mind's discontent. You'd like to get to enlightenment, and it's the teachings of the Buddha that will lead you to that. And then during his lifetime, he did speak of a future Buddha, that was going to arise 2,500 years after his death, which is 2017. That's the date. So what is that? 7 years ago that he talked about this Buddha was going to appear in the world. But keep in mind, when a Buddha arises in the world, they're not going to go on the 5 o'clock news and make an announcement that they're a Buddha, because right away people would discount that person and say there's no way that that person's a Buddha, because their ego is trying to get admiration and gratification. So a Buddha would be wise enough to get to enlightenment by themselves without the help of any teachers or any guides. And they would be wise enough to just start sharing their teachings to be able to help countless people get to enlightenment. And people not knowing who a Buddha is actually more helpful to the Buddha, because one of the powers that a Buddha has is that people don't know that he's a Buddha, and he can observe the natural state of somebody's mind and then be able to help them with teachings that are going to help them get to enlightenment. Whereas if everybody knew who the Buddha was, like say like their ear was turned a certain way, or their nose was turned a certain way, or there's some physical mark that identifies that this person's a Buddha, even though that doesn't exist, but let's just say there was, then people would know like, oh, this is a Buddha. And now everybody would probably be on their best behavior around that person. And now the person's ability to be able to observe the quality of a person's mind and then be able to help them would be rendered useless, because people would be on their best behavior around this person. Where what a Buddha is interested in is being able to see a person's natural mind and how they function in the world, so that then as they see the various pollutions, they can then help them with teachings that are going to actually help them. So the Buddha did speak of this new Buddha that would arise in 2017, but you shouldn't think that that person is going to get online or on the news or make some grand announcement that they're a Buddha. They'll just start sharing their teachings in the world and helping countless people get to enlightenment. Okay, we have a question coming in on Zoom, and because Zoom text is kind of small and my eyes are pretty old, I have to look at it really close here. We have a question here. It says, hello, David. Is the goal basically to eliminate all feelings, so to feel nothing? No, this isn't actually true. What you're doing is you're eliminating conditioned feelings. There's a difference between conditioned feelings and then certain mental qualities. So by the time somebody gets to enlightenment, when I describe enlightenment, sometimes people think, oh, it must feel numb or you must feel nothing. This isn't actually true. What you're eliminating is you're eliminating conditional feelings, where the mind isn't basing its inner feelings on some condition. So for example, in the unenlightened state, if it's sunny outside, you'll be happy based on the condition that it's sunny. And as long as it's sunny, you'll be happy. This is a conditional feeling that you've based your inner feeling on some condition. This happiness is based on the condition that it's sunny. But now the problem with the conditional feeling of happiness is that because it's based on a condition, that condition is not permanent. So when the condition changes, now you're not getting what you want anymore, and your mind's going to move to sadness or anger or frustration. So if it starts raining or some other weather event, this individual who's based their inner feelings of happiness on the sun, they can't maintain their happiness because it's conditional. So this happiness arises, it changes, and then it fades away. And the same thing's happening not only with the weather, but so many conditions. Maybe your bank account. If your bank account is this, you'll be happy. But if it's this, then you'll be sad or angry or frustrated. If your mom and dad do this, you'll be happy. But if they do this, you'll be sad or frustrated. If your bosses or your coworkers or other people in the world do this thing, you'll be happy. But if they do this, you'll be sad or frustrated or irritated. So as your expectations, your longing, your yearning, your craving grows more and more and more, your wants, the amount of time you can be happy becomes diminished, smaller and smaller and smaller. So what you're doing is you're removing the causes and conditions where the mind is forming its inner feelings on some condition. So that way, when you eradicate those pollutions out of the mind, you can just always be happy. You can have unconditioned happiness or unconditioned joy, where the mind is always in that mental state. But these aren't conditioned feelings. So you're eliminating conditional experiences or conditioned feelings, and you're experiencing these unconditioned mental qualities. So you're going to still experience happiness, but it's going to be unconditioned happiness. It's not going to be this conditional happiness that these things have to happen in order for me to be happy. And if those things don't happen, then I'm going to be sad. That's what the unenlightened mind experiences. In the enlightened mind, you wake up, you're already happy. all day long, you're happy. You go to sleep, you're happy. You're just always happy because your mind is unconditioned. So your goal isn't to eradicate all feelings. You're just eradicating the conditionality of these feelings so that they're not temporary, that you can get to the unconditioned peace and joy. And then we have another question here on Zoom as well. Sorry, I need to keep taking this mic off. Is Abhidhamma considered Buddhist teachings as well? There seems to be different opinions where it is said that maybe a later addition by his later students. Okay, so the Abhidhamma is considered to be part of the Pali Canon, but some people don't consider this the original words of the Buddha, and I'm one of those people. If you look at the Abhidhamma, or some people refer to it as the Dhammapada, what this is this is a scholarly work that was done about 1,200 years after the death of the Buddha, where scholars or academics or researchers, historians, were looking at what the Buddha taught, and then they were trying to summarize it in verse form. So what this is an interpretation of the teachings of the Buddha in more of a poetic language. It's not the actual words of the Buddha. And if you know anything about the scholarly community or the academic community, they're usually interested in things from an anthropologic perspective or from a historical perspective. They're looking at something like what the Buddha taught, and they said, how did this impact the world? Let's try to understand how it impacted the world. And now you study it from a historical context. They're not actually practicing the teachings. They're not interested in enlightenment itself. They're interested in how these teachings impacted the world, and they're looking at that kind of thing. So when scholars are trying to interpret the teachings of the Buddha, they're not doing it from the side of a practitioner. They're doing it from a scholarly perspective or an academic perspective. And the way that you get deep wisdom about the teachings of the Buddha is through practicing the teachings. So if 1,200 years after the death of the Buddha, these non-practitioners are looking at what he taught and then trying to summarize it in verse form, they're not going to be able to get the clarity and the deep meaning of what the Buddha actually taught. So what I share with students is I share what's called the suttas, or the discourses of the Buddha. These are the actual spoken words of the Buddha, where you can learn them, you can reflect on them to independently verifying them, and you can practice them. With the Dhammapada or the Abhidhamma, you can't really do that with most of what is in there. You can't learn it, reflect on it to independently verify it, and practice it, because it's more of a poetic words, more in verse format. So you'll see that if you get into the Pali Canon and English study group, which sometimes students will first take this group learning program and then they will move into the Pali Canon and English study group afterwards, after they learn this, then you might see a couple of different teachings from the Dhammapada, but the vast majority of what I teach and what I share is from the discourses or the suttas of the Buddha, so that you can learn, you can reflect, independently verify, and you can practice. Because the Dhammapada is just a summary in a kind of a verse format. It's not the actual spoken words of the Buddha. All right, let me see if we have any other questions here. All right, I'm not seeing any other questions anywhere else. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to share with you guys what the teachings of the Buddha are not. This is one of the reasons, one of the ways to understand what something is to explain to you what something isn't. Okay, so the teachings of the Buddha aren't a collection of beliefs, doctrine, concepts, opinions, and views that will produce a pleasant afterlife if you just believe in what he taught, or an unpleasant afterlife if you do not believe in what he taught. So he's not teaching rules or commandments. He's not teaching a doctrine of belief. He's not teaching views and opinions. He's teaching the natural laws of existence that you can independently verify. And the goal of this path isn't to produce a wonderful afterlife. The Buddha actually didn't even teach about an afterlife. He taught that if you don't get to enlightenment, that there is rebirth. But once you get to enlightenment itself, he doesn't teach what's next after that. But by the time you get to enlightenment, your mind is so peaceful and joyful now in the present moment in this life, you're not going to care what's next, if there is anything next, right? So it's not about believing a bunch of things. It's not about a bunch of opinions or views and then hoping something good happens when you die. That's not what the Buddha actually taught. The Buddha didn't teach a religion. Sometimes people think about the Buddha's teachings as a religion. I don't think of them as a religion. And it really depends on how you think of religion. The way that I think about religion is I think about an organization that's collected up certain teachings, and there's one person at the top, and this person at the top is disseminating these teachings, and then everybody's kind of convinced to believe these things and practice these things. There's usually certain rites and rules and ceremonies and rituals and worship that is being done as part of kind of a religion. And there's certain rules and commandments that everyone must follow in order to create these kinds of things. If this is the way that you think about religion, that there's one person at the top that's disseminating things about what to do and what not to do, if you think about religion as rites, rituals, ceremonies, and worship, if you think about religion as rules and commandments, then what the Buddha taught is not religion at all. Because there's not just one person at the top of Buddhism that's telling everybody what they should and shouldn't do. There's no rites, rituals, ceremonies, and worship as part of the teachings of the Buddha, where in some environments that are calling what they do Buddhist, you might see rites, rituals, ceremonies, and worship being done. You could go to a Buddhist temple, you can read Buddhist books, and they will be talking about rites, rituals, ceremonies, and worship. If you get back to the original teachings of the Buddha, he never taught any of that kind of stuff, because the ultimate goal is to get to wisdom, that you need to awaken to these natural laws. And a rite, a ritual, or a ceremony or worship isn't going to produce that for you. So if you think of religion in this way, then the teachings of the Buddha aren't a religion. And that's what I would share with you, that it's this better way of life, that when the Buddha awoke from his unenlightened state and getting to this enlightened mental state, he didn't say that I've discovered a new religion. That's not what he said. He said, I've discovered a better way of life. He figured out how to get to this peace and this joyful mental state. And then he shared guidance with others to be able to help others understand how to get to that same peaceful and joyful mental state. And you can't do that through rules. You can't do that through commandments. If you're just following a bunch of rules, you're not going to understand the why behind all the things that the Buddha taught about how to eradicate these pollutions from the mind. You can't eradicate pollutions of mind through following a bunch of rules. The world doesn't become peaceful by everybody following a bunch of rules. Nobody is interested in following a bunch of rules. Think about your life. You don't like following a bunch of rules. So the Buddha actually didn't teach rules and commandments or rites, rituals, ceremonies, and worship. The teachings of the Buddha are not punishments and rewards. He didn't dangle this carrot and say, hey, come do this, and if you do this, you're going to get this wonderful thing when you die. And he also didn't talk about these punishments either. He's just sharing with you this cause and effect and this action and result, and you can see that truth for yourself. So there isn't these punishment and rewards in his teachings. There isn't this mystical or magical thing about his teachings, or superstitious or auspicious things. You can see in his own words that he talks about auspicious things, and that his teachings are not an auspicious thing or superstitious thing. The teachings of the Buddha are not something to attempt to force other people to do or try to control other people to do certain things. What you're doing on the path to enlightenment is to train your own mind. Sometimes when people are learning these things, they think that they need to go out and convince other people to do the same thing that they're doing. But that's not the case with the path to enlightenment. The path to enlightenment is always about your journey. It's about your inner work. It's about you having essentially a well-vetted self-help program to heal from what hurt you so that you never need to hurt again. And there's no part of these teachings where you need to go out on the street corner and convince other people to do the things that you're doing. Instead, it's about you developing your wisdom and you training your mind rather than trying to convince other people or force other people to do something. The teachings of the Buddha, they're not the short, catchy phrases that will produce some sort of benefit in your life. If you've been on Facebook or other social media where they share Buddhist things, you oftentimes see these quotes that are attributed to the Buddha, and there's these short little catchy phrases. And if you research them, about 99.9% of them, the Buddha actually didn't even say, but people are attributing them to him. So you might see these short, catchy phrases that people are attributing to the Buddha, but that's not necessarily the original teachings of the Buddha. So his teachings aren't these short, catchy phrases, give me 1 minute of something and that's going to somehow drastically improve my life. It's this consistent journey over many weeks, many months, many years of gradually building up your practice to the point where you're actively training the mind in a determined, dedicated, and diligent way, that you're consistently on an ongoing basis training your mind. The teachings of the Buddha are not stuck in a cultural past that degrades and judges other people. Sometimes nowadays, people will use teachings like what you see from the Buddha or other traditions, and they themselves might be judgmental towards a certain culture or a certain gender or a certain sexual orientation or a certain race or ethnicity, and they will try to use the teachings of some previous teacher in order to justify their own thoughts and their own opinions. But when you read the original teachings of the Buddha and you see his original teachings, he never degrades or diminishes anybody at all. There's no ethnicity, there's no sexual orientation, there's no gender that he degrades or judges or looks down on. Some people might try to say that the Buddha degraded women or he didn't respect women. This is untrue. If you go through his original teachings and you learn his original teachings, he never ever says anything degrading or diminishing about women or any ethnicity or any sexual orientation or anything like this. So there's no cultural past that his teachings are based in. His teachings are based in the natural laws of existence. So as you're learning his teachings, you're not going to see these really old things from the past where his teachings are based in this kind of cultural tradition where it degrades people or diminishes people. It's just the opposite. He's teaching you that all people are equal, that we should look at each other as equals, that we shouldn't judge each other. We shouldn't put ourselves above others and below others. This is the ego. So his teachings are not stuck in this cultural past. So just kind of a little bit of a summary is that a Buddha is an individual who gets to enlightenment by themselves without the help of any teachers or any guides. They share their teachings for the rest of their life, helping countless people get to enlightenment. They then leave their teachings in such a condition after their death that countless more people get to enlightenment. The path to enlightenment is a journey of growing, learning, and evolving. It's doing this inner work to be able to heal from what hurt you so that you never need to hurt again. You're developing this life practice through gradual training, gradual practice, and gradual progress. Sometimes people think the Buddha sat under a tree. He instantly got to enlightenment, right? He sat down under a tree, he meditated, and he instantly got to enlightenment. This isn't actually true. If you read his original teachings, he shares that it was not instantaneous, that it was gradual training, gradual practice, and gradual progress that led to his enlightenment. And what enlightenment is, in a nutshell, is it's where the mind is peaceful, calm, serene, and content with joy, no longer experiencing any discontent feelings. And it's a permanent mental state that once you attain that mental state, your mind will never go backwards ever again. It's physically impossible for an enlightened being to experience anger and frustration. It's just not possible. The mind can't do it because the causes and conditions that are producing the anger and all those other discontent feelings have been eradicated from the mind. They've been uprooted and eliminated from the mind. So that's a bit of a summary for you. Now going into what the group learning program is it's this live, in-person, or online program where you're learning the path to enlightenment, either here at the temple or through Zoom, through Facebook or YouTube. You can attend through the online mechanisms in the online platform. I teach on Sundays and Wednesdays at 9 a.m. from here at the temple, and then I live stream that, and you can come in through Zoom. And depending on your time zone, that might be Saturday night or Tuesday night, right? And then I also teach Sunday evening at 9 p.m. from my home studio. And depending on where you are, that might be Sunday morning and Wednesday morning, right? But this is all based in Thai time. You need to be able to figure out what time zone you're in and to be able to tune in if you're going to tune in on the live stream. All of these classes and courses and everything that I teach in this program, it's recorded. So if you miss the live class, you can attend by looking at the replay through YouTube, through Facebook, or through our podcast. On Sunday is what I do is I use this first book, volume 1. It's called Developing a Life Practice, The Path That Leads to Enlightenment. And I share a chapter in this book each Sunday. The first 5 weeks or so, I'm giving you an overview of the path to enlightenment and going deep into some of the teachings. But then by about the 6th week, I start with chapter 1. I start from the very beginning and I go all the way through the book, chapter by chapter, every Sunday. So you can be reading the book before class and or after class, and you can be attending the classes because there are certain things in the book that aren't in the class. And there are certain things in the class that isn't in the book. So the combination of the two, you'll be fully informed to be able to learn through each Sunday and going into those details. And then on Wednesday, this is where I teach meditation, I teach Pali chanting and instruction, and I open up to any and all questions. And I do that on Sundays too. You can ask any and all questions that you like. Then we have this Facebook group where students can ask questions. You can post your questions in there, and then I'll be the one who answers them for you. So you can get help 4 different ways. You can ask questions in classes. You can post a question in the Facebook group, and I'll answer it for you. You can send me a private message, and I have all the different messaging apps and email and all those different things. Or you can schedule personal guidance, either here in Chiang Mai, or you can schedule online, and we'll meet in Zoom. Because if you're online, you might not be here in Chiang Mai, but we can still meet one-on-one in Zoom, because it's one thing learning in a class, but it's another thing applying it in your daily life. You might have certain challenges that you're trying to figure out how to apply a certain teaching in your daily life. So you can use this Facebook group where I'm posting excerpts from the book, and students are asking questions and I'm helping them. There's the book, audiobook, video, and then podcasts and quizzes that you all have access to. And I'm going to show you the link for that here in a moment. And there's this ongoing support that I just mentioned, the 4 different ways that you can actually get help. You might be asking yourself, why would I take the group learning program? Well, it's to accomplish these goals to get to enlightenment. And I was sharing with you earlier what enlightenment is where the mind's peaceful, calm, serene, and content with joy. You've eliminated the discontentedness. You can experience this peaceful life and face the challenges that you experience in life with this wisdom. You can notice improved relationships, both personally and professionally. You'll have this increased focus, concentration, clarity of mind, and deep memory. And by getting to enlightenment, you eliminate this constant cycle of rebirth where you're being reborn over and over and over again. So this is some of the benefits or some of the advantages of attaining enlightenment and why somebody might be interested in taking the group learning program. And now in terms of how to do this, is you would like to acquire a version of this book. You can get it from our website for free. You can download it and read it as a PDF. You can take it and go print it if you like. Wherever you are in the world, you're welcome to print it. Or you can get copies here at the temple by just reimbursing us for our printing cost. Or you can order it on Amazon if you have access to Amazon. So this very first book, Developing a Life Practice, The Path That Leads to Enlightenment, is what's going to be used as a guide for this entire program. And I'm going to go through every aspect of the book. And then there's certain things in the book that I don't cover in class, and certain things in class that I don't cover in the book. So how I'm going to do this is, as I mentioned, each Sunday and Wednesday, we're going to be walking through the program, and on Sundays I'm going to be sharing a chapter from the book, and on Wednesdays I'm going to be teaching you meditation, helping you build up your meditation practice. Whenever you miss class, which I'm sure you will at some point because of impermanence, it's not going to be possible for you to come to every single class. You can access the recording on YouTube, on Facebook, or you can go to our podcast and you can get the access to the recordings there. Keep in mind that this is an independent journey, that you're going to need to read the book or listen to the audiobook or watch the videos, listen to the podcast, take quizzes if you like. You can ask questions. All of this content is out there for you. How much of it or how little of it that you get involved with is up to you. All of this content is available, and you just decide what's working best for you, whether it's reading the book on your own, whether it's listening to the audiobook. There's even a version on YouTube where you can actually see the book, that I have it displayed on the screen and you can hear me reading it to you at the same time. This is really good. Even when I first wrote this book, I used to use this to prepare for classes, because even though I wrote the book, there are sometimes I needed a refresher about what I wrote. So I would use the audiobook. I would read it on the screen and I would listen to myself saying it as well. So this helps you to retain the content, whereas if you were just reading it on your own, you might not retain it as much. So if you look at it with your eyes and you hear it as well, this can help with retention. You're going to need to establish a daily meditation practice of breathing mindfulness meditation and loving kindness meditation. And I'm going to start helping you do that on Wednesday. I'm going to start with a 4-part series on breathing mindfulness meditation to build up your breathing mindfulness meditation. And then after our 4-part series over 4 Wednesdays, I'm then going to help you build up a loving kindness meditation. And if you can't attend on Wednesdays, that's okay. Some people are working or some people don't have access to the classes on Wednesdays. Sundays, that's what the recordings are for, so that you can gradually build up your meditation practice of breathing mindfulness meditation and loving kindness meditation. And then if there's things that you've learned in other places, which I'm sure you have, to a certain degree, I would suggest that you set those things aside. Where you have questions and you're interested in understanding why what I'm sharing is different than what you've learned in other places, please ask those questions. But you might notice that there's been certain things that you've been exposed to that are completely opposite of what the Buddha taught, like rites, rituals, ceremonies, and worship. Or if you've been taught that the Buddha sat under a tree and he meditated and instantly got to enlightenment, and you might think that everything you need to be doing is all about meditation and not understanding how to learn and practice the other teachings, you're going to need to set this aside so that you can actually approach the true teachings of the Buddha to be able to understand what it takes to get to enlightenment. So as you're learning things that conflict with what you currently know or currently think you understand, feel free to ask me those questions and I'll be able to help you. And then what I'll share with you guys is that in terms of getting benefit out of this program is you're going to get out of it what you put into it. That nobody ever accomplished anything wonderful or magnificent through complacency. That over the next 7 months, if you're gradually developing your practice and gradually building it up, you'll be able to see that it's going to help you. It's going to improve the condition of your mind. There's students that sometimes learn with me in a 5-day course, and they learn the first 2 days. They come in on the 3rd day, and they're like, David, I just got this email this morning that would have normally shaken me up. I would have been so upset and frustrated. But after the last 2 days of studying the teachings of the Buddha, I understood and my mind was calm and I was peaceful. I'm so surprised. I didn't think I was going to experience benefits that quick, right? So some people as quick as 2 days can experience benefits. So each person's a little bit different, but you're not going to get to those benefits without applying some effort and energy. You're going to need to apply some dedication, but you just kind of gradually bring it into your life. Because of course you've got other things going on in your life. But if you're gradually reading about 10 or 15 minutes a day, maybe 20 minutes a day, just a little bit. If you sit down and you read an hour or 2, this is like taking a big bite of pizza, and now it's hard to chew it and it's hard to digest it. So you'd like to just take little bites, and then it's easier to digest. So if you just get in the habit of reading about 10, 15, 20 minutes a day, and even though you're interested in reading more, set the book aside. Set it aside so you can digest what it is that you just learned and reflect on that and start practicing it. So you'll get out of the group learning program what you put into it. And then in terms of our schedule going forward in the next few classes, that on Sundays, today is kind of like a welcome and an introduction to the group learning program. But then the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th Sundays, I'm going to be doing a deep dive into the Eightfold Path. The Eightfold Path is the core central teaching of the Buddha. So I'm going to be breaking it down into 3 individual sections, which is the wisdom section, the moral conduct section, and the mental discipline section. So I'm going to be spending an entire class period on each individual section because this is the core central teaching of the Buddha. And in order to understand the path to enlightenment, you would need to know this inside and out, backwards, forwards, left, right, up, down. You'll be able to learn it in detail through gradually taking our time to walk through it over 3 classes. So at the end of those 3 classes, you will have a certain understanding of the path to enlightenment, having seen the entire path and then going deeply into it through each of those individual classes. Then on the 5th class, I'm going to be teaching what's called the 10 fetters in the 4 stages of enlightenment. These are the 10 individual pollutions that the Buddha discovered, and everything that he taught with the Eightfold Path is to help you eliminate those 10 pollutions, and that's where you actually get to enlightenment. So I'm going to introduce you to those 10 fetters and the 4 stages of enlightenment. Then on the 6th Sunday, that's where we're going to start with chapter 1 of the book. And from there, we're going to go chapter by chapter by chapter by chapter. So right now, if you'd like to read, you could be reading the preface of the book. And if you'd like to read, you could read chapter 4 and chapter 5. But then we're going to eventually start with chapter 1, because the first part of the class, or the first part of this program, is chapter 4 and chapter 5, just to help you get started to really penetrate into the core of the teachings so that you'll understand right up front what the core teachings are of the Buddha. And then on Wednesdays, the 1st, 2nd, 3rd, and 4th Wednesday, we're going to be learning breathing mindfulness meditation, that 4-part series. And then the 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th is learning loving kindness meditation. And then the 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th, I'll be sharing with you Buddhist chanting. And then from that point forward, what we're going to be doing is rotating between breathing mindfulness meditation and loving kindness meditation. Each Wednesday, we'll be switching from one to the other. And then I'll just open up to any and all questions that you guys have on each of those days. Okay, so that's everything that I have to share with you guys today. Quite a bit to really talk through and kind of get you guys started on the path to enlightenment. But let me see if you guys have any questions based on what I've shared about the program or about anything that we've been talking about. Remember, you can ask your questions by putting that into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom. In the comment section, I'll be able to see that. Or in Zoom, you can electronically raise your hand and ask any questions you like. And then those of you guys here, you guys know how to ask questions. So it looks like Rachel has a question. If you go ahead and open your mic, ma'am, we'll be able to hear you here.
David, for the 9 p.m. and 9 p.m. sessions on Wednesday and Sunday, are they the same? Are you giving the same teaching? Different?
Did you say, are the Sunday and Wednesday evening classes the same as the morning classes?
Yes, because I don't see the evening classes in the calendar.
Okay, so what calendar are you looking at?
The one you sent to me is Daily Wisdom 2024 calendar.
Oh, I see. They should be on there. You can send it back to me and I'll take a look. But the 9 a.m. and 9 p.m. classes, it's the same topic. But of course, there's going to be some differences because there's different questions. I'll probably be explaining it slightly different from one to the other. But it's the same topic from 9 a.m. and 9 p.m.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Okay, I'm not seeing any other questions anywhere. Let me just check just to doubly make sure. Okay, yeah, I'm not seeing any other questions anywhere. So what I'm going to do is just end class by thanking all of you guys for joining, whether you're here at the temple or you're online and you're learning. Thank you for taking the time to dedicate your effort to learning and practicing the teachings of the Buddha. The next 7 months is going to be great to share these teachings with you guys and help you to understand what the Buddha taught and help you develop your life practice to be able to move closer and closer to this enlightened mental state. If at any point that you would like to reach out and get help, whether it's during class or outside of classes, you're always welcome to reach out to me and I'm here to help you. As I mentioned, you can ask questions in class, you can post in the Facebook group, you can send me a private message, or you can schedule personal guidance with me either here or online. I'm pleased to help all of you guys. So thank you for your time and dedication. Perhaps we'll see you guys in one of these future classes. Have a very lovely and wonderful rest of your day. Take care. Sawadee krap. Sawadee krap.
Thank you again for watching. Enjoy your meditation. Look forward to seeing you online and answering any questions that you might have. Thank you so much.